1999, a 15-year-old boy sat alone in his bedroom in Miami, Florida. He had a second-hand computer, a dial-up modem, and no idea he was about to become the most wanted hacker in American history. His name was Jonathan James, and over the next 12 months he would do something that by every reasonable measure should have been impossible. He would breach the United States Department of Defense. He would intercept classified military communications. He would steal source code from NASA, software that controlled the life support systems of the International Space Station. And when the government finally tracked him down, he was still just 16 years old. Jonathan James was born in December 1983 in South Florida. From an early age, he had an unusual relationship with computers, not in the way most kids did, playing games, watching videos. Jonathan wanted to understand how things worked at a deeper level, at the level where most people never look. By his early teens, he had taught himself programming, network architecture, and, most critically, how to find the spaces between systems, the gaps, the unlocked windows in buildings that everyone else believed were sealed. He gave himself a handle. Online, he went by C0 Mraid. In hacker culture, a handle is your identity, your reputation. And in 1998, at 14 years old, C0 Mraid was beginning to build one. But here is something that most coverage of this story gets wrong. Jonathan James was not motivated by money. He was not working for a foreign government. He had no political agenda. He wasn't trying to sell anything, or leak anything, or hurt anyone. He hacked because he was bored. He once told investigators, almost casually, that he just liked to explore. That systems other people called secure were, to him, simply puzzles that hadn't been solved yet. That mindset, combined with a raw technical intelligence that no one in his life had any framework to recognize, is what made what he did next not just possible, it made it inevitable. In 1999, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA, was one of the most sensitive divisions of the United States Department of Defense. Its mandate was protecting America from weapons of mass destruction, biological threats, chemical agents, nuclear programs. Their internal computer systems held thousands of messages, personnel records, operational discussions, and, most dangerously, login credentials, the usernames and passwords that unlocked access to servers across the U.S. military network. Jonathan James found a way in. Working from his bedroom in Miami, using a consumer dial-up internet connection, he installed what is called a backdoor onto a DTRA server. A backdoor is exactly what it sounds like. A hidden entrance. A door that looks like part of the wall to everyone else, but opens if you know exactly where to push. Through that backdoor, Jonathan intercepted over 3,300 internal DTRA communications. 3,300 messages, among them active discussions of military operations, security protocols, and critically, login credentials for multiple systems across the DoD network. He now had keys, and he had no intention of stopping at one door. He had been inside the Department of Defense for months before anyone noticed. He was careful, methodical. He covered his tracks the way someone twice his age with formal training might. Not perfectly, but well enough. Well enough to stay invisible until he decided to go somewhere even more sensitive. NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama was responsible for one of the most critical pieces of software in existence at the time. It wasn't a weapons system. It wasn't classified in the traditional sense. It was the software that controlled the life support functions of the International Space Station. Temperature regulation, humidity control, the precise environmental balance that allowed human beings to survive in the vacuum of space, 250 miles above the Earth's surface. Jonathan James hacked in, and he took it. He downloaded 1.3 megabytes of NASA source code, proprietary software that the agency valued at approximately $1.7 million. When NASA discovered the breach in late 1999, they made a decision that stands, to this day, as one of the most remarkable admissions of institutional vulnerability in the agency's modern history. They shut down their entire computer network. For 21 days, one teenager, a consumer dial-up connection, a bedroom in Miami. He forced the United States Space Agency to go dark for 3 weeks. The shutdown cost NASA $41,000 to investigate and remediate. But here is what NASA never fully explained to the public. For those 21 days, engineers had no certainty about what else he might have accessed. No way to confirm whether the software had been modified before he copied it. No way to verify the full scope of what he'd seen inside their systems. For 3 weeks, there was genuine uncertainty at the core of the most technologically sophisticated space program on Earth. And the source of that uncertainty was sitting in his bedroom in Florida. By September 1999, the Department of Justice had enough. Federal agents coordinated a raid on a residence in Pinecrest, Florida. They moved through a quiet suburban neighborhood, passed a lawn, through a front door, and found a 16-year-old. Jonathan James was cooperative. He showed them where everything was. He didn't try to destroy evidence. He answered questions. He seemed, by all accounts, genuinely unbothered, as if the magnitude of what he'd done had never fully registered. Or as if he'd always known this day would come. In January 2000, Jonathan James made history again. He became the first juvenile in United States history to be incarcerated for cybercrime. He was sentenced to 6 months in a juvenile detention facility in Alabama, an additional 6 months of house arrest upon release. He was required to write formal letters of apology to both NASA and the Department of Defense, and he was banned, explicitly, legally, from using computers for any recreational purpose. The system had processed him, charged him, sentenced him, released him, and for a while, it seemed like the story of Jonathan James, Seer Ramraid, had reached its end. It hadn't. In 2007, one of the largest retail data breaches in American history was disclosed. The TJX companies, parent corporation of TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and HomeGoods, confirmed that hackers had stolen the credit and debit card information of over 45 million customers. Federal investigators, working through the forensic evidence, identified methods and techniques associated with, among others, Jonathan James. He was 23 years old. He was living in Florida. He had rebuilt his life. And now he was the subject of a federal investigation for a breach he insisted he had nothing to do with. The pressure was enormous. The investigation was real. And the prospect of a significant federal prison sentence for a crime he maintained he did not commit was not abstract. It was immediate. On May 18, 2008, Jonathan James was found dead at his home in Pinecrest, Florida. He was 24 years old. He had taken his own life, and he had left a note. In it, he wrote, "I have no faith in the justice system. Perhaps my actions today, and this letter, will send a stronger message to the public. Either way, I have lost control over this situation, and this is my only way to regain control." The boy who had once broken into the most secure computer systems in the world, who had taken control of systems that no civilian was ever supposed to touch, felt at the end that he had lost all control over the one thing that mattered most, his own story. And there is something deeply uncomfortable in that sentence. Because the skills that made Jonathan James remarkable at 15, the obsessive curiosity, the drive to find gaps in systems, the refusal to accept that a wall was actually a wall, none of those skills translated into protection once the systems he was up against weren't made of code. They were made of institutions, and institutions are far harder to navigate than any firewall. Jonathan James never sold national secrets. He never endangered a single life. He was never motivated by ideology or money or malice. He was 15. He was curious, and he was, by every technical measure, extraordinarily talented, in a way that the world around him had no language or system to recognize until the FBI showed up at his door. The systems he exposed, the Pentagon's vulnerable servers, NASA's unprotected source code repositories, were vulnerable long before he found them. And the only reason anyone knew about those vulnerabilities at all was because a bored teenager in Miami decided to look. This is the part of the story no official report includes. The most powerful government on Earth was not protecting its most critical systems. And the person who revealed that, the person who forced NASA to go dark for 3 weeks, who walked through the Department of Defense without an invitation, wasn't a foreign intelligence operative. It was a boy who just wanted to see what was possible. If this story hit different, you already know what to do. Hit that like button right now. Not later. Now. because the algorithm decides in the next 30 seconds whether this video reaches the next person who needs to see it. You pressing that button is the difference between this story spreading or disappearing. And subscribe, because the next video on this channel covers a story that makes this one look like a test run. A single piece of software, no larger than a document, that silently destroyed a nation's nuclear program without firing a single shot. And the people who built it have never officially admitted it existed. That video is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss it when it drops. If this story affected you differently than you expected, that's by design. Because the cybersecurity stories worth understanding aren't always the ones that feel clean.